Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you're listening to a weekly podcast about books and life, not necessarily in that order. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show on iTunes, or use our RSS feed with your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/vm. We're also on Twitter at vmspod, on Facebook at facebook.com/virtualmemoriesshow, and on Tumblr at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. You can support this podcast and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/vmspod and set up your level of support. Every week you'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/vmspod and patronize me. So the weekend, it went all sorts of crazy and kind of pear-shaped. Originally, way back 2 weeks ago, Amy and I were supposed to fly out Thursday for CXC, the Cartoon Crossroads Columbus Festival, a great new cartooning festival. It's in its second year. My pal Tom Spurgeon puts it on. Its first year was really wonderful. I was all geared up for this thing. Then, during the Barcelona trip, I learned that I was going to need to be in D.C. for some congressional briefings this past Friday. So, $400 in change fees later, I was packed and ready to go solo from Dulles on Friday, which was kind of a logistical nightmare, setting it all up, figuring out what I could bring with me, knowing I was going to be running around Capitol Hill with enough gear, including my podcast stuff, that I could get through Senate security and be able to get over to Dulles, fly out to Columbus, and not be carrying too much stuff with me, which meant probably wearing the same suit Friday and Sunday and trying to figure out the whole wardrobe thing, how light it could all go into a valise instead of a big rolling carry-on, all of this crazy shit. And I had figured it all out, thought I had it all kind of nailed. And Thursday afternoon, I learned that the meetings were postponed indefinitely. So I rebooked the flight out from Newark instead of Dulles and added another $100 in change fees in the process. Amy had already canceled at this point because we'd only be in Columbus for like 48 hours, and that wasn't worth it. So that was kind of interesting. And because I had all this crazy stuff building up to that weekend, I hadn't really booked any podcasts. There's only one that I'd kind of set up, and that was provisional. Because I didn't know how long I was going to be there, didn't know the mood I was going to be in. I'm finding it more difficult to shift from lobbyist Gil to podcast Gil on a dime, and it would have been kind of tough flying out 5:30 from Dulles, landing 7 o'clock at Columbus, and getting right into comics mode. So I guess it's for the best that I got screwed and ended up out of $500 in change fees. Anyway, I had a good time at the show, if that helps. It's a really fun event, CXC. Like I said, my pal Tom is one of the organizers. And there's a lot of unique aspects of Columbus that make it a really great place for a cartooning festival. The city's got history, both literary and in cartooning. It's got the big OSU college presence around it. It's got the Billy Ireland Comics Museum, which is phenomenal. The downtown library is this insanely wonderful space for events. And Columbus is located so that it's a short enough drive for a whole bunch of cartoonists to come and celebrate and have a great weekend. And again, this is the second year of the event. It was a 4-day-long shebang. I only got there for Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon, but had a really, really good time while I was there. I made up for a little bit of the podcast stuff by recording a weird outdoor one with Ben Catcher, the great cartoonist behind, well, best known for Julius Knipple, real estate photographer. Ben and I had done a live podcast back in 2013, and this one was kind of a strange follow-up to that. Ben's convinced I should edit it down to like 5 minutes, that nobody wants to hear him talk at length, but we'll find out in a couple of weeks. And the other one was the provisional one that I'd set up, and I never ironed out a time until pretty late, but I'm so happy it came together. It's with Ed Goren, the New Yorker cartoonist who does fuzzy people and animals. And he's been drawing for the New Yorker since 1962, so it was a real joy to sit down with him and talk about his life and his art and what it's like having this half a century career within cartooning. Also, I discovered doing research, he was a trade magazine schlub, just like me when he was in his 20s, except he only did it for 6 months instead of 20 years of his life. But anyway, we found a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I'm really overjoyed that I got to meet this guy. So, on top of that, I met a bunch of great artists and publishers, and I'm hoping some shows spring out of that. Steve Lieber I got to meet, and he and I have been Twitter corresponding on and off for a couple of years. He has a wonderful new comic out he's the artist on. It's a comedic crime comic called The Fix. It's from Image Comics. It's just wonderful. He turned me on to it, or gave me a copy while I was there, and I just, when I was totally burned out and back in my hotel room at midnight on Saturday, I'm like, let me read Steve's comic, and found myself totally engrossed. I also got to meet Ted Stern, Pete Maresca, a bunch of other people, and it was nice. I got to catch up with a lot of old pals and past guests like Carol Tyler, who won this great Master Cartooning Award. Actually, she split it with one of the other guests, Sergio Aragones, who everyone in the world loves, and I got to meet him and talk very briefly. I didn't have the gumption to pitch him on doing a podcast. He seemed really busy, and his English is fine, but sort of halting, and I just didn't want to suddenly throw a hey, let's sit down and talk for an hour on microphone, even though you have no idea who I am. I really should get over that, right? Anyway, all in all, pretty exhausting weekend, but in a good way. Part of that good way was that I ate my body weight in barbecue at my favorite food truck in Columbus, possibly my favorite food truck anywhere, Ray Ray's Hog Pit. I rented a car during this trip solely so that I could go out to Ray Ray's, because everything else would have been in walking distance of my hotel. But I landed, got the car, and started driving out there. Cartoonist Katie Skelly texted me just as I was getting to the rental place and asked if we were getting together for lunch. I said, we can, but we're going to Ray Ray's Hog Pit. And she was on, so stopped at her hotel. She jumped in the car. We just headed up there, got some barbecue, sat in a curb, and ate. And then I did the same thing on Sunday. So I'm pretty enormous right now. Anyway, between the lack of sleep, the barbecue, talking to cartoonists at parties until late, well, by my standards, my voice is a little shot. So that's what I sound like this now. Anyway, you knew there was going to be an anyway. Our show this week is with Liza Donnelly, the great New Yorker cartoonist and human rights activist, or at least women's rights activist. I think she's human rights overall. I recorded with Liza a few weeks ago when I went up to Rhinebeck, New York to meet her and her husband, Michael Maslin, who's also a New Yorker cartoonist. Amy and I spent an afternoon with them, and it was a really lovely time. They're good people, and they have a ton to talk about, really, it's one thing to meet individual guests. It's another thing to meet guests who are partners like this, and to see how they kind of play off of each other in conversation, and to get to know them was really kind of nice. And I've stayed in touch, which I always feel good about when it's not a, hey, I've just, sucked an hour of conversation out of you, now I'm leaving. If you're a past guest that's happened to, I didn't just say that. Anyway, as it turns out, I was pretty lucky to get time with Liza because since we got together, she has been jet-setting all over the darn place, attending various cultural events, and she's built a reputation both as a public speaker and with her live drawing talents, and she's very much in demand. In fact, at CXC, I met Ann Telnace, this great editorial cartoonist out of Washington, who I'm hoping to record with if she gets over the fact that I told her that I'm a lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry. And when I mentioned that I was going to post an episode with Liza this week, she said, you actually managed to get her to sit down for an hour? So I felt kind of honored, is what I'm saying. Anyway, caveats for this episode, because there should always be caveats. There was a fan right behind Liza. When Michael did his episode after that, we kind of angled it in a different way so it wasn't as noisy. But that left some artifacts on the audio as I tried to sample that out. Also, there's a bird right outside the window, a couple of birds. You're going to hear them all episode long. Now, Liza's full bio is at lizadonnelly.com/bio. At the end of the episode, I'll give you a spelling for everything. Anyway, here's a piece of her bio. Liza Donnelly is a writer and cartoonist with the New Yorker magazine. She is a sought-after public speaker and does live drawings of events covering the 2016 Democratic National Convention for CBS News, as well as the presidential debates. She recently joined CBS This Morning as contributing cartoonist. She is a columnist and cartoonist for Forbes.com, specializing in politics and women's rights. Donnelly draws a political cartoon for Politico and Medium, and she's a contributor to many other national publications. Donnelly was a finalist for the 2014 Thurber Prize, the only award for written humor in the United States. Donnelly is a cultural envoy for the U.S. State Department, traveling around the world speaking about freedom of speech, cartoons, and women's rights. As a public speaker, she has also spoken at TED, the United Nations, and the New Yorker Festival, as well as at colleges, universities, and corporate venues, among other places. In 2014, she was the recipient of an honorary degree from University of Connecticut and delivered the commencement address. Her work has appeared in print publications including the New York Times, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, The Nation, and the Harvard Business Review. Donnelly is the author or editor of 16 books. Her most recent is titled Women on Men, published by Narrative magazine. Some of her other books include When Do They Serve the Wine?, The Folly, Flexibility, and Fun of Being a Woman, Funny Ladies, The New Yorker's Greatest Women Cartoonists and Their Cartoons, a history of the women who drew cartoons for the magazine, Sex and Sensibility, 10 Women Examine the Lunacy of Modern Love in 200 Cartoons, and Cartoon Marriage, Adventures in Love and Matrimony with the New Yorker's Cartooning Couple, with Michael Maslin. She is a New York director of the international project Cartooning for Peace, helping to promote understanding through humor, and is president and co-founder of USA FICO, the U.S. chapter of the International Cartoonists Organization. Her work has been in numerous exhibitions globally, and she has curated exhibits of international cartoons here and abroad. She lives in New York with her husband, New Yorker cartoonist Michael Maslin. They have 2 daughters. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Liza Donnelly. So tell me about Cartooning for Peace.
Cartooning for Peace, it's a wonderful organization. It started in 2006, and I was invited to come. It started at the UN in New York by Kofi Annan, who was then Secretary General, and Jean Plantu, who's the editorial cartoonist for Le Monde in Paris. And this was right after the Danish cartoon controversy, which many may have forgotten about now. But it was controversial and very alarming that cartoons could cause death and destruction. And so Kofi Annan and Jean wanted to have a forum called Unlearning Intolerance. It was actually a week-long forum with other events, but we had a day for cartoonists, and they invited 12 cartoonists. I was one of them. A couple of other people from the U.S. From all over the globe. We came and spoke about our work and the importance of editorial cartooning and what we feel our responsibilities are. So now the organization is global, and they meaning the people who run it. It's a foundation now. Have exhibits all over the world. I'm helping to organize an exhibit in New York this year to celebrate the 10th anniversary. Mm-hmm. I'm going to Geneva next week to celebrate it there. So I'm very, very fortunate to be connected.
Yeah. What put you into their profile? What led to you getting picked to be part of this?
Apparently,
without tooting your own horn, of course, but
no. I mean, somebody. I had been doing editorial cartoons mostly for the New Yorker back then. This was not pre-internet, but on the very cusp of the internet getting to be a thing. So I was doing some editorial cartoons for the New Yorker in the typical New Yorker kind of editorial cartoonist way, not very loud, but they were there. And somebody who was organizing said, "You know what? We really need to have more women represented here." And somebody else, I don't know who, said, "Oh, what about Liza Donnelly? She does editorial cartoons." So that's
and
they contacted
she's
me.
a woman. So I'm kidding. Go on.
Yeah, right. And I am a woman. So.
Do you have any concerns about being too respectable as a cartoonist? That, you actually have some degree of responsibility, where cartooning is always, kind of thrived when it's a little bit under the radar?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that, because what happened since 2000, actually since 9/11, is I got more and more political.
Yeah.
And with the advent of the internet, I got even more political. And then with the advent of more, I've always been a feminist, but being more and more concerned about feminism, I just felt I needed to do more cartoons about politics, global issues, and women's rights. So, and then having the internet gave me the opportunity to publish those cartoons on the internet. So they were not in the New Yorker. They're not in the New Yorker. These stronger cartoons about rape and violence and women's rights and politics. They're not in the New Yorker, but they're online for other publications. So I'm pushing myself to be louder and stronger.
And is there a degree that, with the New Yorker, with a career in cartooning, there's still, is it funny, is always the cartooning message. What was it like for you making a transition of, having something that's a stronger message that doesn't necessarily have to rely on humor, or something that simply isn't funny?
Well, it's actually kind of
your
in my
method.
wheelhouse. I'm not. From the beginning, I wasn't like your laugh out loud kind of cartoonist. Yeah. So it's not. And I lived in Italy when I was 16, so I got really fond of international cartoons and captionless cartoons. So a lot of my cartoons early on were captionless. So doing cartoons about global issues and not being funny, but being serious cartoons, was something that sort of came naturally to me. Well, it's still hard, though. It's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, is there an audience expectation in that respect? That, I've had comics and cartoons around since I was a child. I'm used to the whole panoply of modes of expression. But is there a sense of I don't get it, it's just people not appreciating something being, an editorial cartoon at this point, versus wanting to see something in prose or, more detailed?
For some reason, I've been lucky. If people don't get it, they don't say anything to me.
Oh, good. Because of the internet, everybody's got an opinion.
I have. Not to say I haven't had some negative attacks, particularly if I do an anti-Trump cartoon.
But now there was it a basket of deplorables or a bucket of deplorables? Is it bucket or basket? I forget, but, we're among the deplorables. But what's your history with cartooning? How did you start?
When I was a little girl, I was drawing from very young, and then my mother gave me a book of cartoons by James Thurber, and I started tracing his cartoons. I also loved Charles Schulz, Snoopy, Peanuts, but Thurber was my main influence at that point. I was like 7 years old, and I developed my own style, and I realized I could make my mother laugh. So, and my father too, but he was working a lot, so it was more trying to cheer my mother up. And then then in high school, I did the same thing with my friends. In college, I was drawing in college. So it wasn't until college that I decided that maybe I should try to submit to the New Yorker. We'd had it around the house, but in college, I looked at it when I was young, and I thought, this is too status quo. They've got like fur ads, they've got like ads for liquor. It's like, I don't want to be a part of that. I was a budding socialist, but then I looked at the New Yorker more closely, and I realized that it had political cartoons in there. They were just quieter, and I thought, maybe I can, if they'll have me, maybe I can do cartoons for them. So,
how long were you submitting before they bought something?
Well, I submitted in college and nothing happened. And then when I got to New York, I submitted again. And within a couple of years, I sold my first one.
And when did you get to New York?
When?
Yeah.
1977.
Okay, so really just a perfect time to arrive, huh? That's as a kid, I was watching it at a distance. I was born in 71, so, you just see the mushroom cloud of New York.
Right.
In
It was
that
exciting.
era.
Yeah, it was rents were cheap, and I got a job at the Natural History Museum so I had a base to draw cartoons in my spare time. So yeah, it was an exciting time in New York. I met Roz Chast right around that time.
One of my favorites. So. She was actually the guest who people on Facebook most plotzed over when I said, I'm going to be interviewing Roz Chast this week. Surprisingly, when I say I'm going to be interviewing a theological scholar about, traumatic origins of the Bible, that doesn't seem to really spur people. But Roz,
Yeah, everybody loves cartoons, I mean, and everybody loves Roz too. So
yeah. Well, I just, it was one of those moments of wow. She actually offered me either tomorrow or Wednesday, what would be better? I'm like, I would have less time to worry if it was tomorrow, so let's go with tomorrow and just not have too much anxiety, realizing that, anxiety is our Jew stock in trade. So, what did you study in college?
I started out studying biology because I thought that was my other interest, but then switched to art. So hence, working at the Natural History Museum was a nice combination. So I was drawing realistically animals and things like that, but on the side I was doing my cartoons, which is what I really wanted to do. So,
and your cartoons are generally people centric, right?
Yeah,
I can't think of a lot of animal oriented.
Well, if you're Gary Larson.
I mean for you in particular, yeah. Gary Larson, I'll still.
Well, the first cartoon they published in the New Yorker of mine was a man worrying that he didn't pet dogs enough. So. So, I've had my share of dog and cat cartoons.
And what took you to Italy?
My father wanted to take a sabbatical, so we did that. Rented our house and
went away
to Italy. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, how have your gender views evolved? And I've watched TED Talk of yours. Read a bunch of pieces on gender. But how did you find yourself changing, and how have you seen worldviews changing as part of what you're engaged in outside the New Yorker? How'd your feminist consciousness evolve? That's a shorter way of putting it.
You have 3 hours? No. No, it's really not that.
Or Sunday afternoon.
It's not that complicated. When I was young, in my 20s, I was like many other women in their 20s, or men as well. I was very grateful to Gloria Steinem and her generation for paving the way for us to have many more rights. And I said, thank you very much, but we don't really need feminism. We're fine. And which is every generation comes up thinking.
I was going to ask because, but we'll get to that point, I'm sure, when you talk about how those kids nowadays and their, post-feminism.
But actually, we'll get to that later. But I think it's better than it was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a cartoonist. Actually, when I first started submitting, I submitted via a friend of my grandmother's. I didn't sell it this time, to the New Yorker, and her name was Andy Logan, and she was the city reporter for the New Yorker. And she said to me, I'd be happy to send your stuff up to Lee Lorenz, the art editor. I was just asking him why there aren't more women cartoonists. Why did he think that was? And he's always looking for new talent anyway. So up until that point, I was probably 21 or something. I hadn't thought of myself as a woman cartoonist, and I still don't. I'm a cartoonist. I happen to be a woman. But it kind of, I think it probably challenged me a little bit. Like, I put that in the back of my mind. I just did my cartoons. I didn't think gender had anything to do with it. So I just did my cartoons, and it worked because I sold to the New Yorker. It wasn't until so I just did my work. Actually, in the 90s, when I was submitting cartoons to the New Yorker and selling under the then editor Tina Brown, she started buying more cartoons of mine. I now know in retrospect that were these snarky women making sarcastic comments. She fostered that voice in me, which I didn't even realize at the time, but now I realize that was the beginning of something for me. And then in 1999, a friend asked me to be on a panel of cartoonists to talk about why there aren't many women editorial cartoonists. This is what was an association for editorial cartoonists. I said, sure. And so in process of thinking about that, I and trying to nail down why there weren't more women. Like, what is going on here? I started to think about it more seriously and ask people's opinions. And then I got to the panel, and it was done in D.C., I think, and it was in a fairly large room. And I look out, us women are on the panel. There's 4 or 5 of us. I look out, and it was a sea of men, all the members of this association. So it was a visual, like, aha moment.
That would explain it.
So at that point, I thought, I got to figure this out. I got to look into this. Over the next couple of years, I did research, and I started writing a book called Funny Ladies, which is a history of the women cartoonists from the beginning of the New Yorker until 2000, which is when I wrote the book. And, it was so much fun, Gil. It was like, first of all, spending time in the archives, reading about the New Yorker in the 20s and 30s, and reading all the books that have already been written about that time period. And there were women in the first issue of the magazine, so I found out a lot of great stuff. And so that took me on further, being more vocally feminist in my work. And as I think I told you earlier, like the advent of the internet in the 2000s, 9/11 sort of jarred me, thinking I got to be more political with my work, and that included women's rights, more understanding of global feminism, global issues concerning women all over the world. And I thought, well, a lot of men can certainly draw about feminism, and they do. Actually, feminisms is the right way to talk about it, because there's more than one feminism. I'm getting serious. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. This is what I do, And this is why these things end up going for an hour. Trust me. It's okay.
And actually, the book, I made myself a little book tour, so I traveled around the country talking about these women that I'd found out about, and that led to an adjunct stint at Vassar College teaching women's studies, co-teaching it. So I learned a lot more about women's rights and the study of it. So and then with the internet, I met so many women and men and women's groups and activist groups online on Twitter. I love Twitter. So it just sort of kept snowballing, and then published more and more feminist cartoons on Medium. I think that about sums it up.
Was there a particular woman you discovered through the New Yorker archives that was a revelation to you? Was there someone you're like, holy crap, I can't believe I didn't know about her before now?
Yes, that's a good question. Yeah. A woman named Barbara Sherman.
Yeah.
I'd sort of heard of her before. It's Sherman with a D. And she was very prolific. She started out as a cover artist, but then she started doing cartoons within a year, I think, like 1926. And she was really prolific. And she sort of was from what I didn't know that, I couldn't find out that much about her, but I found out enough to know that I really adored her. And then her work was also very sort of feminist, in a 1920s way. That she was like she herself appeared to me to be sort of like a flapper. She was pushing the envelope of what women could do, how they could talk about their men, about their relationships. I think she did a cartoon about being gay. I'm not saying she was, but I'm just saying about that phenomena, which was so different at the time. Of course, the 20s were sort of forward-thinking in that way anyway. So, and then she continued into the 30s, and after the crash, and then as the war started revving up, her work started to fade. She worked more for Esquire, and eventually sort of dropped out. I guess she stopped drawing. She's a wonderful artist.
What's the New Yorker mean to you, besides a job, of course? What does it mean as an institution, as a phenomenon? I mean, it sounds like it was the thing you wanted to be published in. What did it mean once you were part of it? How did your understanding of the New Yorker, and what it's come to mean in your life?
Well, I met my husband because of it. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
we raised a family.
And you'll never forgive them. Oh, I'm just kidding.
Right. Well, when I started out submitting to the New Yorker and falling in love with the New Yorker, I had the impression from talking to other cartoonists and reading about it was that it was a place where you were nurtured as an artist, that it wasn't just, you weren't just producing illustrated jokes. You were speaking, of what you were thinking about, what you were feeling, what you were observing, what you were finding funny. So, and they would support you that way by buying your work and publishing it. So, that's one of the things I really liked about it, was that it was supportive of its artists.
What have you gotten better at? I'll just say technically from a cartooning standpoint, as opposed to how your worldview has evolved. As a cartoonist, where have you improved? Alternately, when you look back at your old work, what makes you cringe?
Well, we all have like a zillion cartoons that make us cringe, sitting in boxes because when I was first starting out with the editor at the time was Lee Lorenz, I was throwing him everything, all kinds of weird stuff, which he didn't buy. Because the more you draw, the better. I think the more you draw, the more you do anything, hopefully the better you get. So.
Well, even this, trust me, 4 years ago, this would have been a disaster. So.
I'll have to go back and listen to
they're
those.
terrible. I listened to some of the early ones. Oh my God. Yeah, it's rough.
No, so you get better at drawing, but then you have to be careful not to be too good at drawing, because you have to make it look fresh. You can't.
That's what I wonder. Is it simply, well, my basis of comparison, the cartoonist whose work most boggles my mind for the continuous level of improvement is a weird one. It's Bill Griffith, the guy who does Zippy the Pinhead. Mm-hmm. If you look at his current work, his brushwork is phenomenal. His detail is so amazing compared to his stuff in the 70s and 80s. It doesn't distract from, the immediacy of the work, but there's a degree that I was thinking when I sat down with him, like, surely in your 60s you start to get looser and let stuff go. No, I just get tighter and tighter as each year goes by. I've never taken a sabbatical. I just keep drawing this thing every day. So I wonder, that's one thing when it's a 3 or 4 panel strip. Right. When it's a single panel sort of thing, did you find yourself able to let things go, getting better in terms of what you don't need to do and what you do? Well,
yeah, I think so. There's a point where you start out, you draw too much. At least with my style is very minimal. So you start out like in my 20s, early 20s, teens, I was drawing too much. Even though my style was loose, I came from James Thurber's world. So, and his stuff is loose by definition. And then it's a matter of paring it back and learning how to let go of detail, learning how to draw simply and make it look like you just whipped this thing off. And in fact, you didn't. I probably did 20 different versions to get to that point. So now that's a process that was like the middle of my career, trying to make it look fresh and loose and spontaneous. And for Frank Modell, who's a wonderful cartoonist, a wonderful man, he just recently passed away. He was there in the early years of the magazine, but I got to know him, and he was publishing when I first started publishing. He said about doing your finished art for the magazine, he said, for the New Yorker, you have to draw better than you know how to.
Interesting.
And it always stuck in my mind. It's like, okay.
Do you feel you hit that point? Do you feel you achieved that? Are there panels that you just feel you nailed?
No.
Okay.
There's some drawings of mine that I really like, but no, I'm always some that I really don't like.
Okay.
That I like. Why did I let that go? Why did I turn that in? Why? I'm not talking about the sketches that I do, but the finished art. I look at it and think, why did I do that again? Why didn't I draw that again? Mm-hmm. Make it even looser. But I think unlike Bill Griffith, like my work is by definition minimal and loose, supposedly. So the more you do it, the tighter. If you get tight, then that's not a good thing. So what's happening now, Gil, is like I'm like a whole new. I can't think of the word.
Style. Maybe
not style, but like
approach.
I'll tell you what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm drawing on my iPad.
Which is my next set of questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that the quality of the line that I can get is so much like the quality of line I had when I was 18. I love it. You know, it's is
this Apple Pencil stuff, or are you actually drawing with finger?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
It is. It's weird, but it's great. I love it.
Cool.
I also use another stylus that comes with the program that I use, but so I go back and forth between stylus and finger.
What led you to start doing that? And how does it differ from working with paper?
When I did that TED Talk, I also did a TED animation. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I only
worked
saw
with Ted
the
to do
stills that were there. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll send you a link.
Cool.
They invited me to write and produce with them an animation about cartooning, and that was really fun. I narrated it and I helped. I wrote the script and then an animator worked with my style and whatnot. Anyway, when I was done with that, I was about to leave and say goodbye. Thank you very much. There was no pay. That's fine. It was really great. It's for schools, actually. It's TED Ed. They handed me this iPad as a gift. This is like a small iPad. This is about 4 years ago. So from there, I started fooling around with the iPad, and I found a great program. And I was watching the State of the Union address one night. I was really bored, and it was not recent because this is not boring right now. And I started drawing what I was seeing and tweeting it out because that's what you can do with this program. And it struck a nerve. People loved it. They were like, "What's that? What's that? Oh wow, that's neat." So I was drawing like men's ties and women's dress. The few women that were in the room, their dresses and facial expressions, and like really loose, really quick, and just tweeting them out. So that's how that started. And
you became a live drawing.
Yeah, now it's something that
legend.
People want me to do. Yeah. Well, a legend.
I like legend. You know,
I'll take it.
As long as it doesn't make you feel old or anything, I like legendary status for some cartoonists. But yeah, you moved on not moved on, in addition to doing political live drawing, you've also done, like the Emmys, Oscars, et cetera. How's the approach differ in that respect? What are you looking for when you're doing that?
It is different because I'm not, and each live drawing situation is different in itself, and I also do regular cartoons on the iPad. So, if I'm doing a live drawing thing for myself, and my audience, my Twitter followers, and Facebook followers, and Instagram followers, then I will sometimes put my own humor in it, and I'll make a comment about it, making fun of a celebrity, or making fun of the Oscars, or making fun of John Boehner and his skin color, or making fun of Obama's ears, or or something they're saying. I'll make fun of that, either on the drawing or in the tweet. If I'm working for somebody else, it depends on if they want me to do that or not. I'll have to clear that up first. Sometimes it's just a straight impression of people. I'm not a caricaturist. I guess I do impressions. And they're really quick. I don't do them from photographs either. That doesn't work. So
you just try to find an essential, quick.
And there's sometimes I don't get it. I can't get it. Like there's certain people that I really have trouble with, like George Clooney. I don't know why. I can't draw him.
He's too busy ogling.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No.
I know standard female stereotype. Yeah. Your husband sitting nearby, but Yeah, let me ask. Actually, the building an online audience, which is something I've never done, which is why this is not going to be listened to by anybody but us. I'm just kidding.
No, I'll make that different.
Oh,
I'll spread it around.
What was it like for you? How much of a self-promoter are you? What did it take for you to start realizing, there are people who are following what I post about, and did it become any sort of I would say competitive, but at least an actual, and I hate saying brand building, a way of extending, who you are as a cartoonist or who you are as a creator? Mm-hmm. Was there did you have a self-promoting gene before this?
No, I didn't.
Did you sort of find it in the
Not at
process
all.
of
Quite the opposite.
Yeah, which is what I was sort of assuming, because
Yeah.
cartoonists lead a life of quiet desperation generally.
Also, I was raised with a Quaker background, and we're not supposed to do that kind of thing. So,
As a Jew with Eastern European heritage, I'm supposed to be on a vaudeville stage, apparently. But I'm born in the wrong time for that,
Right.
certainly. So.
no, I think first of all, with Twitter, I came to it naturally. So I know some people don't like it, and that's I think it's a personal thing whether you take to it or not. Mm-hmm. And I really like talking, exchanging ideas with lots of different people. That's what I consider Twitter is. And so I try to be human and I'm not self-promoting most of the time. Try to talk to people, show them what I'm doing, like share what I'm doing. I'm not scared of just sharing my cartoons on there. I don't care if I get paid for them or not. I'll just do a drawing and throw it out there and say, hey look guys, look what I just did. Is that you think it's funny? Do you think it's interesting? You know, whatever. I like to videotape myself drawing, hold the phone over my hand and do that. People seem to like that. So I think I made a realization a couple of years ago that social media for me is an extension of what drew me to cartooning initially, which was I was shy and I didn't like to talk, and I was drawing to make my mother laugh and then my friends laugh. So it was like a communication thing that I was able to do with drawings. I was able to share with people through drawings, and that's what I'm doing on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, and the whole Liza Donnelly.
It's just a bigger platform, and I'm enjoying it.
It's interesting to me because it's that initial impetus is to make people laugh, and again, what you do now is bigger than you're still funny, but you're also speaking to larger issues. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
And you draw Trump in the school kid shorts and socks. That's
thanks,
always
thanks. Well, when I was in high school, I really I grew up during during Watergate, the civil rights movement in Washington. I grew up in Washington. All that stuff swirling around me, and I think there was, and I wanted to be a political cartoonist. There wasn't a motivation there. Like I wanted to do something, and I wasn't like the kind of person that would make pickets and go out and yell slogans, and that was not me. So I thought, well, I know how to draw. I can do cartoons. I really wanted to be Herb Block, who was the big name in Washington at the time, cartoonist. But I ran into a problem because I didn't know how to access my opinions at that age. I just didn't know what I believed, or I was too afraid. I was too afraid to share them. So. Mm-hmm. I'm not that way anymore.
Which is good. Do you mentor?
Yeah.
Younger cartoonists, male, female, doesn't matter particular, or do you try to help shepherd female cartoonists in particular?
I officially mentored a young woman at School of Visual Arts. Mm-hmm. She chose me as her advisor. Yeah. But anybody, I get, that's the other great thing about social media. I get emails and messages from young people wanting advice and help. That's great. Men and women.
Strange guys from New Jersey hitting you up for podcasts.
Right. Do you need me to mentor you, Gil?
Oh, it being less neurotic, that would be tremendous. But we'll talk about that post-feminist idea, how you relate to younger women now, and they're under the same way you had a "Hey, thanks, Gloria Steinem" vibe. What do you pick up off of a younger generation of women and how they see glass ceiling, workplace harassment, etc.? Is there a sense of, we understand we're part of a continuum with what you guys did, or is it, as I would come to expect, no, we're completely unique and different than everybody who came before us, and therefore, we don't pay attention until it happens to us? Not to put words in your mouth by any means.
Yeah. Please do. It's hard to generalize, but I will. I think because of the internet, there are more women connecting across generations than before. Mm-hmm. So I think I feel like there are more young women involved in the women's rights movement than when I was in my 20s. So in that way, I'm encouraged. I think, of course, there's still a lot of women that don't think we need it. And of course, I live in a bubble of Northeast liberal feminist bubble, but
everybody's got their cocoon.
Yeah.
That's
but I've become friends with, this is what's great about Twitter, I become friends with individuals. I often never meet them, but I find out what their bubble is like. I'm friends with a woman now, Laura Register. She's in rural Georgia, and she's an activist, grassroots activist down there. And so I learn what it's like, what she's hearing from people in her Facebook world, you know, which I don't see that. And we saw that, the collective United States, when Bernie Sanders was running for president, your Facebook page was
suddenly dividing.
Divided. And my friends who are pro-Bernie saw nothing but Bernie stuff, and I saw nothing but Hillary stuff. And
so your socialism did moderate as you got older, is what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
No.
You just stuck with Hillary over Bernie? No. Okay, that's cool.
I'm a realist, socialist. But I see the appeal of Bernie, but I was more of a practical person.
Understood. So Jill Stein it is. I'm just kidding. What brought you out here? We're about an hour and a half north of New York City.
Uh-huh.
There's apparently a grand tradition of New Yorker cartoonists getting the hell out of New York, going on for generations now. Mm-hmm. What brought you up to this lovely farmhouse in Rhinebeck? I think it's lovely. So
thank you. It is lovely.
I live in a 50-year-old house that's in the middle of the suburbs and just kind of generic in its way. So,
well, when I met my husband Michael, he was living up near here at the time, so he showed me our town, Rhinebeck, and I fell in love immediately with him and the town. Mm-hmm. Not in that order, but maybe in that order.
Ish. He's wielding a kitchen knife, but I'm sure he's going to put that down in a second. Don't worry.
I've made him a good feminist. And I've been in New York around 10 years already, and I was ready to at least part-time be outside of the city. So we decided to get married, and we looked around here to buy a house, and we were really lucky to find this. So we now...
I mean, because it's a difficult road and no one can actually find the house?
Right.
Or, just because I got lost doesn't mean everybody else did.
3 hours late.
It did kill me when I had the Roz chest, when usually I show up about 15 to 20 minutes early because I'm that neurotic. With Roz...
You should warn people about that.
Yeah, well, I usually just kind of linger nearby-ish. But with Roz, there was actually an accident. My GPS told me on the Tappan Zee when I was heading out, so I had to go up the Palisades, over Bear Mountain Bridge, through down the Hudson, etc., and got to her door like 1 to 2 minutes early, which to me felt like an abject failure. And I'm convinced from now on she thinks I'm perennially late just because I was there on time. Because neurotics, that's how we work. So.
I'm learning a lot about you, Gil.
Oh, there's very little to learn. I tell people, but Rhinebeck really works for you. It's
Yes and no. I love it here. Our house is wonderful. It's like built in the 1840s. But now our daughters are grown, and we now have a small studio in Manhattan, in the very tip of Manhattan, in Inwood. So I love living both worlds now, because New York is... I just love the people. I love, I've been doing these subway drawings. I take the A train to get downtown from Inwood, and it's a bit of a ride, not that long. It's like 25 minutes. And it's not usually crowded, so I can draw on my iPad in this app I use with my finger. I can draw people that I see. So anyway, I just love the people. I love the energy, and I'm lucky that I can come back up here. when it gets to be too much.
Yeah, that's where I am out in Jersey. It's 25 miles north and west of the city, but it's woods, deer, bear, wild turkey, all that stuff. So close enough to New York that I can not go in too often, but, I just stay out where it's nice and at ease. What's your, besides that sort of the subway thing, what's your drawing practice like? Do you have set times that you get
it's really
working?
all kind of,
or is it just part
it's
of?
just kind of a.
Okay.
I used to have a regular schedule, like, you submit to the New Yorker on a certain day, so everything would lead up to that day. When I was young, it was a Wednesday. Now it's a Tuesday, and now sometimes it's a Thursday. You never know. And I would do my batch of cartoons for that, and then do any other illustration jobs or books that I was doing on those other days. And now that is loosely still true. When I try to submit on a given week, I obviously stick to the schedule that they have and submit on a Tuesday. But I'm doing so many other things, and the news, particularly right now with the election, I'm just doing political cartoons almost every day. And if there's something in the news that needs to be spoken to right then and there, I'll do it right then and there if I can.
Yeah, that's the other side of the paper versus screen issue, in addition to how you create the work, the distribution of it and the way you can do something and get it out there instantly, like you were saying with social media. What impact did that have on your approach to things, knowing that it wasn't going to be, a 3 or 4 week lag from, or however long it is from when they buy it to when they print it? How did that impact,
it
the way
frees
you
you up,
look at
frees
things?
you up somewhat, frees you up, at least me, for the political stuff. That also, I really love political cartoons in the New Yorker. I love doing them, and I love the idea of that form, but it is a different kind of political cartoon because it has to have some kind of legs to last at least a week, and hopefully longer. The greatest political cartoons in the New Yorker are the ones that you can understand 40 years later and still find funny. Those are gems, and that's what you work towards, but they're not always easy to get. So now I can just join the conversation, and I think online with the drawings that I do, and people actually speak to me and say, am I going to draw about this? They want to know, where's Liza? And it's like, we need Liza. It's actually, somebody said that was really great to hear. We need Liza. Where's Liza? Where's the Liza cartoon?
I want to take a vacation, for Christ's sake.
But what was I going to say, Gil?
So that sense of distributing, that sense of immediacy versus waiting.
In a way, I, like you used the word brand the other day, and the other moment, I don't like that word either.
It's like, you could leverage your unique synergies to extend your brand over blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I know. It's all business jargon. I spent 20 years as a business journalist, so that stuff's all... Communication is key to a win-win relationship. That's sort of, that's the title of my fake book someday. But yeah, but there is it's awful business speak, but we both know it's meaning. You have a certain cachet.
For 6 months or so, maybe last year, I had been working for Medium, and they were paying me. It was under the auspices of the Nib, which was started by Matt Bors. He invited me to be a part of it. It was great. He left Medium and took the Nib with him, but I kept my spot on Medium. But I don't know if I should say that. I'm not getting paid, but I don't care. Yeah. I have like 2 million followers on Medium, and so in a way, I realized I was stressing that at that time a couple of years ago that I needed to have a news outlet as my base, and I've got a news outlet. The New Yorker is connected to my name now, like it or not. I love it. Yeah. But I've been there so long. I don't necessarily need to have a news outlet in order to distribute my work. Yeah. So I do it myself on social media, on Medium, on Forbes, where else? Huffington Post sometimes. But anyway, I do it on my own. And make a living selling cartoons, but also doing public speaking, doing this live drawing thing. So the model is changing somewhat.
Do you think of doing standalone books at this point, either ebooks or working on more?
I'd love to. Yeah. They're not easy to sell, Gil. Yeah. The last one I did was an ebook, and I love it, but it's called Women on Men. But
the wrong audience went for it. I'm just kidding. Go on.
No audience went for it. No, my fans went for it, but it's hard to sell a book now unless you're really famous.
Mm-hmm. So. Do you see yourself fitting into a continuum of New Yorker cartoonists? Do you see yourself fitting in either with a tradition or, as far as the people go? Is there a sense of, I'm sort of in this set? Part of it just comes from when I started looking over your husband's blog about New Yorker cartoonists and realized how many of them I've actually recorded with, and how I don't necessarily think of all of them as New Yorker cartoonists, like a Peter Cooper or Jules Pfeiffer, as opposed to a Sam Gross or Roz Chast, who I think of, in terms of New Yorker. But do you see yourself in that sort of continuum, and that, I don't want to say fraternity because, sexist term, society of...
Well, I think maybe I do, in part, if not only for the book I wrote about women cartoonists. Funny ladies. And I was, when I started in the 70s, Roz and I and Merritt Carlin were the only 3 women drawing cartoons for the magazine. So in that way, I think I've got a little part of history there. Yeah. I'm connected to it. And I'm not really sure I'm answering your question properly. But.
Yeah. Do you see yourself overall within the New Yorker cartoonist continuum? Do you see that as a big, I don't want to say definition of your career, but, I fit into this grand tradition, almost 100 years now of...
Well, I think Michael and I talk about, once you've sold to the New Yorker...
It doesn't get any better, which is kind of sad. I'm just kidding.
Trying to think, Gil. You're making jokes and I can't think.
Yeah. You're the one who's paid to be funny. I'm just some schlub from New Jersey, remember?
That's one of my biggest drawbacks is I get so serious so fast. I got to stop. I think I'm part of that continuum. I mean, I'm not one of the... I don't have the numbers that some people have. I didn't sell that as many as other people. Like, some people have huge numbers, and I don't. But I have been there over 30 years. That counts for something.
Yeah. Is there a sense, and this is a question you can tell me to delete after if that's a thing, because it's about the buying cartoons. Is there, does it ebb and flow in any recognizable way that, you happen to sell a few, consecutive
there's
weeks?
no logic.
None whatsoever?
From my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lots of logic down there, but...
Yeah, because I see certain cartoonists suddenly show up, like 3 times in 5 issues, and then you don't see them again for months on end. And I've always assumed it's just some completely arbitrary and capricious,
I don't really know.
Okay.
I'm not a part of the art meeting, so I don't know what they're talking about or how they make the decisions they do. But the other thing to think about is like, and I don't know how it works now, but I know back in the day, they used to, there was somebody who, they'd buy the cartoons and then they'd go into a bank or a bank. And then another individual, not an art person necessarily, would choose what goes in the magazine. The makeup person, they were called. Maybe they still are. And so I remember hearing about one cartoonist who the makeup person didn't really like their work, so they just weren't putting them in there. I'm not going to say who because I kind of don't remember, but Michael, who is it? Oh, Jack Ziegler. The person,
really? When
he first started out, the makeup person didn't, because he was really kind of avant-garde in the 70s. Yeah. His stuff was weird. I remember I was I love Jack, and he's a good friend now, and I would study his books before I broke in, and when I did those early years, I just studied his books because he was pushing the envelope of what a New Yorker cartoon could be. Mm-hmm. And my stuff never became like his, but I think his work really informed me. But so the makeup person didn't like his work or didn't understand it, so they just wouldn't put it in the magazine.
Which, again, giving the neuroses of cartoonists, you can imagine the paranoid fantasies that turn out to be true. That's this came up when I talked with M.K. Brown a few months ago. Mm-hmm. Do you have work that you've never submitted that you realize you could never submit that you just sort of hold on to? because she's got a trove of the unpublishable N.K. Brown that, she figures somebody will find after her death.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Maybe I should start doing that.
Yeah, sort of thinking if there's
I mean, I have journals that probably are...
Yeah, no, these
need to
sound
be
like
thrown
actual cartoons she's done, but she knows she could not submit anywhere.
Wow. Does she have children? Is it going to be published someday?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that she told me on mic means that, at some point, the Fantagraphics guys will descend on the place. And well, again, if anybody ever listened, I'm just kidding. There's a huge audience for this. You'll see. Do you think about long form work? Like Roz, she said her whole mind, her whole approach to things changed when she did the long piece about her parents.
Yeah.
Do you think of
I want to do. I have a book proposal that hasn't found a home yet about a long form graphic narrative piece, but it scares me.
In terms of the time commitment, or have you
the
done
organizational commitment and the time commitment? I don't know how. I mean, I've done long form, Gil. I've done graphic narratives. I did a 20-page graphic narrative for Narrative magazine, which is a great literary magazine that uses cartoons, and the editor there, Tom Jenks, edited me, and we worked together to produce this graphic narrative, which was great. And then they actually published my last ebook, so I'm very indebted to Narrative magazine. But yeah, you're right. It's like what I do is very quick and relatively quick, and one-offs, so thinking about a larger project. I mean, the Funny Ladies was a larger project, and that took a lot of time and effort and a different brain power, because I was actually writing words, a lot of words all in succession. But I'm also fooling around with my live drawing and video right now, and seeing where that will lead. That's longer form, but it's a new thing. I guess maybe also Snapchat. I'm using that somewhat, but I'm trying to figure out.
You're over 18 and using Snapchat? Because
seriously, who told you I was over 18? I think seriously,
I've interviewed internet gurus, and I've asked them what was the app that you just, I'm too old, I don't get this. And every one of them says Snapchat. They can't figure it out. They're convinced it's built for teenagers. It's built deliberately to be non-intuitive so that adults can't figure out how to use it correctly. So it might say something good about you, that you have a youthful mind in that respect.
I really have a young mind, I guess. I did, I live drew the Democratic National Convention and did it for the New Yorker, but I also did it for CBS News. Yeah. And that's leading me to think what other forms they want to hire me again, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, did you imagine that sort of thing as a possibility? Even as the technology was beginning to develop, did you think my work could go from cross-platform synergies and all that wacky business speak?
No, I didn't. Yeah. I mean, we didn't even know about cross platforms 5 years. Well, maybe somebody did, but so I'm thinking about that and what that could lead to. So
I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Liza Donnelly, thanks so much for coming on the Virtual Memory Show.
This was fun.
And that was Liza Donnelly. Go visit LizaDonnelly.com to find out more about her art and her activism, as well as her great live drawing work. That's at LizaDonnelly. So Liza Donnelly, just like it sounds. In fact, you ought to follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Liza Donnelly, which is all one word, spelled the same way, because that's a great way to keep up with her work, where she's going to be, and all of those live drawings that she does. She actually posts there. And in fact, she did a live drawing of me and Michael during our podcast, which I posted during that session. Now, after the main conversation, I asked Liza, so, who are you reading? If you want to hear her answer to that, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show, so you can get access to our monthly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. You can do that at patreon.com/VMSpod, or at paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for supporters of the show, including that podcast, patron-only blog, series of ebooks I want to launch, and a bunch more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. This episode involved a lovely drive up to Rhinebeck, New York. There was only one toll for about $1 on the way up. We visited pals in Wappingers Falls on the way back and grabbed some coffee at this farmer's market stop. And we also bought a really nice blueberry blackberry pie for Liza and Michael on the way up, since I love bringing gifts to my guests, especially ones that I have to go out on a long drive for. And I figured they were probably going to have enough books already, so I didn't want to drop something like that on them. Anyway, if you want to help defray some of my costs, like I said, visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod, and you can make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Paul W. Jones, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Andrew Mason, Greg Tanner, Zach Martin, Craig P. Steffen, and Ron Slate for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories show. We've got the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Now, our music for this episode is Nothing's Gonna Bring Me Down by David Bayerwald, used with permission from the artist. David has a reunion project going with his great 80s band, David and David. You can find out more and support that at facebook.com/DavidandDavidMusic. And that's it for this week's Virtual Memories show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with, well, we might be back with Jim Woodring. Might be back with Ben Catcher. We might be back with Ed Goren. I just don't know yet. I haven't decided. You're going to have to come back to find out which one I picked. The episode is also going to feature my latest Yom Kippur story, which is absolutely bizarre, and I didn't want to waste any more of your time reciting that. So, till next time, you can subscribe to the show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories show on Twitter at VMSpod, on Facebook at facebook.com/Virtual Memories Show, and at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com. And if you like this show, please go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories show, and leave a rating and review for this podcast. That'll help us build a bigger audience. Until next time, you've been listening to the Virtual Memories show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and you are awesome. Keep it that way.